Three. What's going on, everybody? We're back. Nice little Wednesday. We got 2-game slate. Sheets was just pointing out to me pre-show. It's the last small slate of the year. I feel rejuvenated and ready to go get back to it. It was a real struggle for me over the last couple months, NBA-wise. Just couldn't quite hit. I had a couple good days in there that made up for some of it, but not my favorite month and a half or so. But I'm ready to get back to it. We got golf coming up. We got baseball right around the corner. It's a good time. This is one of my favorite times of the year. So I'm very excited. I can't wait for the rest of the season. Sheets, what are your thoughts?
So let me ask you a question, Bobby. So I didn't really have much of a break as far as DFS goes. I was like pounding on all the sports and whatever. So what I wanted to ask you is usually when there's any kind of like a break, whether it be like 2 days, 3 days, a month, whether it be of anything, like people tend to kind of reflect on what they've done and what their process is and how they screwed up, how they've succeeded, anything that they want to change. Do you have any over the last couple of days, any revelations or any just observations that you want to share? Or?
Yeah, I actually did. It's a good question. One of the biggest mistakes I think I've been making is when things start to go south, and it's a similar thing that happens in poker. An example would be, you'd end up starting to play a little bit more conservatively than you probably should when things aren't going as well for you if you're running bad, let's say. Things start going not well in DFS, I have my opinions, and I still play my opinions, but I let other people's impact influence me too much. I find myself at times maybe researching and listening to too many other things, which I don't think is always healthy, especially if I'm in the flow of watching the games. And I think that I wasn't trusting my instincts and taking shots where I wanted to. Because the thing is, like, take a guy like Dennis Smith Jr. example. He cost me all the money the night before we finished, but in all fairness, he was the reason I won anything on the previous 5 slates. If I would have stuck with him as heavy as I felt like sticking with him the whole time, I probably would have been even better off. There's a lot of little things that I did that just felt like they weren't trusting what my own process was and what we had sort of come up with. And I was there was a lot of late situation subs, which usually I'm pretty good at. And I feel like I missed on a lot of those. And what I did was I did a lot of research into all these teams. Fortunately, my family is obsessed with basketball, so we did a lot of talking about it. But I did a lot of deep diving into sort of guys who I think will have a bigger role this season, especially with the trades that are going to come up and whatnot. But I feel good about my game overall. I just think that it was rough. And I think when that happens, I second guess myself. And when I do that, it's not good for my lineups. That's the truth.
In another project that we're sort of working on, there's this concept about sort of like knowing what your own biases are and the way your own brain works, right? And it's like a really important thing to think about. And when I used to back people in poker, I would notice this type of thing as well. And when someone's either, for example, running bad, or let's say they're playing like events that they were too expensive for them or whatever it is, or let's say that there was certain pressures over them, everybody behaves a little bit differently. And people usually fall into different kind of archetypes or whatever. Knowing which one you are is very important for when you have to assess yourself. Like there are some guys who, when they're like running bad and need to make up losses or whatever, some guys just go on tilt and go way too aggressive. And that's one way to lose money, right? And then there are other people who are like kind of the opposite. Like if they're really running bad, they'll say, I'm not even playing anything worse than aces. Like, for example, what I mean? Like, I'm just only going to play good hands because that's the way I'm going to attack this. And likewise, also when some people are playing the wrong stakes, they just won't act a certain way. And everybody's kind of different. And it's important to self-assess and know how you when you play bad as opposed to when you're playing well. Like for me, believe it or not, like when I was playing poker and I felt I was playing poor, I would actually be playing too aggressively, right? Mm-hmm. There are other players that I backed who, when they were starting to press and play bad, they would just I just can't make any plays anymore. I'm just going to fold everything. I'm going to wait till I have the nuts. And both ways are bad to play, but to know which person you are is I think important.
Right.
So like you were saying, one of the things that you were finding yourself is you like listen too often to people and you didn't trust your instinct enough. You know what I mean? And so for you, that's something you always have to kind of keep in mind? And like, so how do you fix that? How do you react to that? One way you could do, like you said, like if I were you, I would just spend like spend a day or two literally just turning off all the computer. You know what I mean? Like just turning off all the content. You know what I mean? And even though that's probably not 100% optimal either, right? At least it swings the other way at least.
Right, exactly. And I think I do know which type of player I am, both in whether it's in poker or whether it's in DFS. And what was interesting to me was that the lineups that I was making the night before, which I often do, I'll just throw in, I'll build a hand lineup without looking at anything on FanDuel and one on DraftKings, which is sort of what I used to do without looking at anything. And I got away from that. But I got away from doing it every day. But when I was doing that, those were my best lineups. And it's the strangest things that should never happen in basketball. You know what I mean? But even without the late tweaks, especially on FanDuel, these lineups were cashing almost all the time. So that's something just trust your instincts more. I don't need to just seeing the numbers over and over again and all the projections. That's not my style. I don't need to rely on that entirely in basketball. And we'll actually get into it when we talk about tonight's games, because I think there's some good examples of ways I got lost in that.
So I do think, by the way, that it's usually, as it is like the first day of the season, I do think it's a good way to get back into it with a little 2-game slate, just to kind of flex your muscles a little bit or whatever it is. You're not playing, by the way, you playing any of the baseball or no?
The early preseason?
Yeah.
It's such a weird
I'm not.
I just for me. Like you're getting one at bat out of like it just doesn't, I don't know. Okay. To me, it just seems so fluky. Yeah. I would have done it just to have a little bit of fun, but I don't think I would do it to do anything serious.
All right. So let's talk about it. So instinctively, before I even pull anything up, I mean, well, actually I'll pull up my screen, but it seems as though, of the 2 games that the obviously the more exciting one, right, is going to be the Washington Memphis game, right? So yeah. I presume that's where the I presume that's where the ownership's going to draw, but there's going to be everybody's going to be owned. It's a 2-game slate. The one other thing I noticed, in case we forget to go over this, I would like to congratulate Jalen Brunson for officially becoming Dallas's point guard, replacing Luka Doncic. Because
seriously, what is that?
FanDuel apparently has taken the job of point guard away from him, and told him that if you want to play for the Mavericks, you have to play small forward. Otherwise, we're not going to roster you. So that was,
it does feel that way. It's really weird. I don't understand it.
I mean, we were talking how weak a position small forward was. So at the end, it was like, okay, no problem. We'll just put Luka in.
Yeah. Whereas LeBron and Luka started the season as point guards. If anything, they're more point guards now than they ever were in the current situation, and then they're treated the other way.
All right. So everybody's in, I presume, for now. Who do you like in the first game?
So the initially the slate was going to be interesting because the San Antonio news, but it looks like these guys who were we had them as doubtful. I had them as doubtful on a couple different things I looked at yesterday. I think that they're probably going to play. So the Spurs are looking a little more healthy. There's still 2 plays I like on the Spurs, but I thought it was going to be a spot where we might need to play, 4 of them or something like that if they only had 8 bodies, which still looked possible even after the break because of all the COVID stuff. So on the Washington side, it's interesting because I love Westbrook in this type of environment. I love him in this matchup. I think he found himself. I think that he's going to come out raring to go the second half of the season. Washington's going to have to play sort of must-win basketball. I would prefer him over Beal. I know he's more expensive. I think that Beal is completely fine. I don't like the matchup as much for Beal. Memphis has done a pretty good job, even with as many fantasy points as they allow because of the pace they play with. They don't give up a ton to the shooting guard position. Now, it's Bradley Beal. He could still completely go off. If you're playing multiple lineups, I would want Bradley Beal in at least a quarter of them, on this slate. But I think that Westbrook would be the guy I would side with. The problem is I like Luka better, and I think that it's one of those situations where if you want to play them, you want to play them together because Westbrook, he's a little cheaper, so maybe that extra 600 matters that much. But I think I would rather find the 600 to get to Luka or try to play them both together. That's my first thought on just sort of slate approach. And I think that on Memphis's side, what's really tricky to figure out with them is they've got so many guys that are getting minutes now. So I'm going to side with who I believe are their guys. I think that what are you getting Brandon Clark's projection at? Because I'm still seeing the 24-minute thing.
Same as usual. He's under projected. I mean, same as before.
It's just wrong. Even if it happens, it's blowouts and foul trouble are the only ways this is happening lately. And he just played 34 minutes against this team the other night. I mean, 2 games before the break. He closes for them. He closed against Milwaukee as well. So I don't see how Brandon Clarke is projected for 24. So I've immediately putting Brandon Clarke at 29 minutes, which makes him the best play for me on the Memphis side, of course, other than Ja Morant, who I don't know what the point per dollar projection is for him on some of the sites you're looking at, but what I'm looking at is just way, way under where I have Ja. I expect a monster second half of the season from him. I think you're going to be looking at him in the high 40s and low 50s quite often. And this is the premium matchup. Obviously, we know how much Washington bleeds fantasy points, especially to the point guard position. So Ja and Brandon Clarke are the guys who I'm starting with. But I really like Joval. And then I'm going to Justice Winslow is probably going to be the value that's in all my lineups. He's closing for them now in that important game against Milwaukee. He's remember he was coming off the injury, had a little bit more time to recover, didn't even shoot or play particularly well, still putting up in the 20s. And I think you're going to see his minutes trend upwards and him be more of a part of their closing core. And remember, Memphis, they're a 500 team. They're fighting for playoff position. They've done a really good job without Jaren Jackson Jr. So all of these guys the problem is they all look like good plays, but they're all playing now. Like we didn't have Kyle Anderson and Dylan Brooks and DeAnthony Melton and Desmond Bane. But for right now, the guys I'm siding with mostly are Clarke, Morant, and Winslow. And I think you can play all those guys together. I also think Ja is the standout play today because there aren't any other good centers on FanDuel especially. So, and if you want to mix in Dylan Brooks, I'm not going to hate it. It's just there's a lot of options. So I can't play 6 Memphis guys, but I do think I'll be playing 3 of them on most of my lineups.
Yeah, for me, you hit on all the top plays. You came around to the Dylan Brooks one at the end, and I had Dylan Brooks as I usually do, and he never seems to do anything. I have him usually ranked a little bit better than you do, and he literally has never gotten there for me. So what do I know? So I have him as a better play. Well, I have him as a better play for Brandon Clarke than Brandon Clarke only because again I'm not. Like you're up his the average minutes, which is obviously going to make Brandon Clarke a great play. The one guy there are 2 guys on the Washington side that I would like to get to. One is Rui Hachimura, and the other one is Mo Wagner. Now Wagner obviously he can score 10 fantasy points or whatever. He could get into foul trouble, anything's possible, but a 3,200 guy when you kind of do want to play at least 2 of the 3, right, between Westbrook, Beal, and Luka, right? So that 3,200 might be able to. I haven't really built yet, but like you could probably if you eat it with Wagner, then you could probably also get in Morant in with 2 of those guys, maybe not, but. Those are the other 2 guys I would bring up is on the Washington side would be Wagner and Hachimura.
Yeah, I agree. And this is going to sound gross, but it's a 2-game slate. So things are going to sound gross sometimes. It's very interesting how this game played out last time. And we just saw it right before the break. And basically everybody's in the same health condition that they were then. Everybody's healthy and all that. What's interesting to me is that Alex Len played the majority of minutes for the first time in a while for the big men, and they've really been playing all 3 centers. So that's what's hard for me about Wagner is like I'm not sure if he's going to play 5 minutes, if he's going to play 15, if he's going to play 20, 25. It's all in the cards for me, and he is definitely the best fantasy producer per minute. What I would say is he struggled massively in this matchup, and he tends to struggle with big, strong centers, and Joval is one of the strongest guys in the NBA. So it actually seems more like a natural matchup for Robin Lopez to me than any of them. And I think Robin Lopez probably gets the most minutes of all the big men today. So if I'm punting, I'm actually going to include Robin Lopez into the fold here. He also played, in that really important game for the Clippers. I mean, he played 29 minutes or 26 minutes in that game. That's a lot more than he's played. And at a minimum cost, if we're trying to get him in, I think he belongs in the conversation with Wagner. Now, the problem is Wagner is like, much better fantasy point producer than Lopez is. But I do think that there is a chance that Lopez gets a lot more minutes, and I still expect Wagner to start, but even when he's starting, he's not playing minutes a lot of these nights. So Robin Lopez also might get you a little different. So that's just something to throw out.
What do you feel about it? you like any of the ancillary Memphis guards like Melton or Bain or anybody like that?
I was thinking about all of them, and then I thought, okay, a guy who's been really terrible for us, really struggling, and part of it is that they're asking a ton of him defensively, and he's been doing a really good job on the defensive end, not so much on the offensive end, and that's Rui Hachimura. And if I look at the Memphis ancillary parts, the problem I get into is, one, it's always hard because they're playing the hot hand, which kind of makes it fun too. But I think like a guy like Bain, for example, who I consider to be a very similar play to Melton, where he's minimum cost on FanDuel, I'll definitely have some interest. But even at 4K, I think he's fine. I just think that how are these minutes really going to shake out? I think that they're all projected to play like some minutes, and that's the way Memphis has done things a lot in the past. But if you look at it, even Jaws, they have projected for 33 minutes. That's based a lot on blowouts. We see what happens in close games. I mean, I just watched him play against Milwaukee right before the break. He played 39 minutes in that game, basically played the whole second half. They're not accounting for that type of situation. So in that situation, it could be Melton, it could be Bain. Tyus Jones might get hot off the bench and play well. But I think I'm mostly going to leave it out, to be honest with you, and stick more maybe with the Washington guys. The guy we didn't mention, I mentioned Hachimura. Bertans, obviously, you can always take a shot on at 4,400 because he can get hot. But Avdia at 3,100 does stand out as being cheap enough to where he can maybe shoot himself. Now, I don't expect him to close or anything, but he did play 26 minutes and 25 minutes the last two games, and is another guy who can shoot himself into being on a tournament-winning lineup very easily. I think he's going to end up kind of popular, but we'll have to wait and see where that goes. But he would be my favorite of the weird parts in this game.
Well, one of the things that I was working on during the last couple of days, and it partially because I was using SaberSim to run stuff like different sports also, is that especially when you're dealing with these 2-game slates. I mean, my almost philosophy, my theory is that you have to get like one of these. You don't have to get like a 0% owned guy, but you got to get like a 10% owned guy to do something. You know what I mean? Like, and the guys I'm looking at, like Melton, Bertans, Bain, out of this game, we'll get to the other game in a minute. I mean, I do think that if you want to, I mean, not that you have to win it this way, but if you want to win a 2-game slate by yourself, you're going to have to at least get something out of the 10% range. And that's why like someone like Denny is fine, but I feel as though he might not really get down that low. I think that you have to find one of the, I don't want to say overpriced, but one of the spec guys like Melton, Bertans, like you said, one of them's probably gonna have a good game. I just don't know which one. Okay, well, that's life, man. Pick a couple and hope you get lucky, I suppose. So that's why I'm looking at Hachimura. I think is gonna get owned too. I think he'll I like him, but I mean he'll be 15 to 20, I suppose. Like to give you an example, like I ran like my initial ownership numbers with projection. I ran it through SaberSim, for example. One of the reasons I do that is SaberSim, again, if you set the settings right, it'll pop out lineups that factor in the ownership just to see what they look like. And just like as an example, like if I ran 150 lineups with it, the top 2 owned guys on the whole thing were Wagner and Melton, believe it or not, because of that extra boost given to a lower owned situation.
Right.
So I'm just something.
Great,
and the third
info.
And the third one I'm going to get to in a minute. The highest owned guy I'm going to get to in a minute in the next game. But that's I guess that's a good enough summary for this first game, right?
Yeah, and I think your point is really, it's valid and well taken. Like I totally agree about trying to find that that diamond in the rough sort of a thing. And I'm not saying just I will pick for people because I know that people get confused with all the names. I would say that I would rather play Bain than Melton, even though Melton has flashed a little more upside. I actually think Bain's minutes are a little bit more secure. He's a little bit cheaper. And I think there will be a little bit more personal bias towards Melton because he's had a couple big games recently where he was just psychotically efficient. There's no reason that couldn't be Bain, and Bain is cheaper. Basically, they're in a very similar spot where Melton gets a little more usage, obviously, but it's not enough to where I think that I'd need to go there to pay more for him. And by the way, Melton is like 6K on FanDuel, and you got Bain at 3,500 over there, so that's a pretty easy decision. But that's the way I'm leaning for these guys. I do think it's going to be hard for me to fade Winslow today. He's a guy I think you're gonna want to get in, even if you're playing these other ancillary pieces.
All right, what do you think of the San Antonio Dallas game?
I mean, right off the bat, so because we had some time, they've been running all kinds of different numbers and all this stuff with this game. This game is going to be weird. We need to know, we've got a bunch of probables, but we've seen this happen before, and just because of the conditioning aspect of the way the Spurs play, and they won't let the guys just come fully right back. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. But what my initial take is that I absolutely want to ride the Kelden Johnson train. I'm afraid he's going to be popular, and I think he will be. So I could see the argument for fading or playing him. Like they did bring him back a little bit slowly after he played only 10 minutes. Then he had I believe it was a 24-minute restriction, played 22 against OKC. Might be able to play more tonight, but I don't know that they're going to want him to. Derek White, his first game, again, the conditioning thing, his first game back from the COVID/conditioning, hasn't played in almost a month, but Derek White is awesome. So I would side like with trying to get these guys in. I think I'll fade DeJounte Murray. Most of his production this year has been without these guys. Now he could always do it, but it's going to be, on these 2-game slates, we talk about everybody because they're all in play. I think DeRozan by the end of the day is going to end up, if he ends up forgotten about, that's a mistake. But as of right now, I don't see him as being as good a play as the other guy, as spending up or playing, Ja, for example. And then you have, if the Spurs do in fact play everybody, it sort of does kill the huge upside for a lot of these guys. I'm going to mention one very, very speculative play just based on the fact that he's played well and they've been winning. Trey Lyles is going to be projected to play almost no minutes tonight. Popovich doesn't care about our DFS lineups. He's not going to sit there and say, okay, automatically we're putting Trey Lyles back to 10 minutes now that we've been winning with him starting and all this stuff. He might change things up. He might stick with what's been working for him. And Aldridge off the bench, Lyles starting. It's a possibility. Keep Kelden Johnson off the bench or start him and play him limited minutes. What's been working, I don't see why they would go away from it as long as it keeps working. The really speculative play I like in this game is, I think if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you want to get some Aldridge on this slate.
Well, first of all, I feel as though if LaMarcus Aldridge is announced as starting,
he won't be.
You don't think so?
I don't think so because he hasn't been and they've been winning. But maybe I don't want to say that for sure, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, because I was reading it wasn't like a whole big thing. It was just from the DraftKings thing. It says Aldridge came off the bench in his previous 3 appearances, but he could rejoin the starting 5 out of the break.
Yeah.
So if he's actually going to start, like for example, that's going to be a rough fade, honestly, at 5,500. Right now, I don't have him start. I mean, like my projection for him was so all over the place.
Yeah.
That it's ridiculous for me to even speculate. Now, again, to play him off the bench would be an interesting. That's an interesting thing I didn't consider. But I guess even if he's coming off the bench playing it's like kind of sad to think about, right? Mm-hmm. That Marcus Aldridge is going to come off the bench and maybe play 20 minutes. You know what I mean? I don't know what happened. Anyway, everybody gets old, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing is I don't say I'm a little depressed, but it's there is no such thing as a free lunch, right? So again, what I did was I did my projections, I did ownership, and I actually looked at 3 different ownership runs. The only one I didn't have yet was Roto Grinders. I'm going to say it, right? Mm-hmm. So I had like the others, and so I inputted them in, and I loaded up in the Saberson, for example, and I ran 150 lineups, and the highest owned guy that I came up with, given the ownership that I put in, was Kelden Johnson, right? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what these guys are going to be on, because I have him 3 different ownership projections, having 12%, 12%, and 13%, right? So if you're telling me that this is like certainly no secret, and he's going to end up being really popular, that's what's going to make him not the great play. So like I said, if he's popping as such a great play, given 12% ownership, it's probably because he's not going to be 12% owned, like you said. And if that's the case, I'm sure all the ownership projections will adjust, and then he'll just be kind of a play, you know. But again, that's why you prepare, and that's why you run this stuff. Mm-hmm. So Kelden Johnson, he was going to, now again, has anything changed for him? Like, are more people playing now than when he was putting these numbers? I'm kind of hoping that I'm kind of hoping for that 12% for a good reason, as opposed to being 25% because you know what I mean? I don't know.
This is the first time they've been healthy in a while. So okay. there is some, but the truth is he was one of the guys who was out for a while. So he's only played the 2 games with a minutes restriction since February 14th. So
Okay.
been almost a month for him. And, we could basically, as a guy in the beginning of the season, we could basically plug in for 30 to 40 fantasy points almost,
Okay.
He was averaging over 30. I know that. So I like Kelden Johnson a lot.
But like I said, no such thing as a free lunch. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, they're going to find out about it. But we'll have to figure out where the ownership stands or what the starting lineup is for the Spurs, I think, before we completely decide. But as of right now, I'm not sure they're going to just go back to what they had before. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And one thing I'll say is, like, all these teams that we criticize in DFS, I just want to say, we're all morons for criticizing them. There's a lot of people out there. All the people complaining about quickly not playing enough for the Knicks should shut their mouth. Okay. Tom Thibodeau has been the best coach in the NBA. And look, Quinn Snyder, the Jazz, has been amazing. He'll win Coach of the Year. But it's the same thing with this situation with San Antonio. Popovich is doing an incredible job. This team is fourth or fifth in the West now? That's insane. This team was projected to be the last team in the West, and that's incredible.
They're fourth and fifth in the West with basically no players.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Anyway, I think it's so because of it, it's not great for DFS. He still may spread the minutes around, but just beware what the starting lineup comes out as, because I think it'll be telling. And either way, I do want to emphasize, though, I think if Aldridge is coming off the bench, there's always enough upside for him. And this is a really good matchup against bigs that can't really handle him, against a team that he almost ended up with, against a team that doesn't play at a lightning quick pace, like Brooklyn, who played him off the court. So it's just, I like the matchup for him in general if he can get some run.
You think that Beal, Westbrook, and Morant and that game scores enough fantasy points that Luka's, let's say Luka busts and scores 50?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that still going to be enough for Luka? I'm looking at the slate. Where are the points going to come from?
Well, I would expect both Westbrook and Beal to be I would expect Beal to be in the high 40s to low 50s tonight, and I would expect, I guess high 40s would probably be where I would guess, but maybe 50s, and I would guess Westbrook would be in the low 50s to low 60s.
I'm trying to figure out if there's any way to fade Luka.
I think there is. I think that if you do, you might be playing the Beal, Ja, and then more middling build.
Okay.
Instead of the Westbrook, Ja, and Beal or something.
Is there enough points out of these middling guys to do it? I'm trying to figure who that is.
It would have to. We probably need a little bit to open up on the Spurs, but look, if we get a couple of the middling guys right, whether it be Bane, Brooks, or this Bane's a little lower end, but Brooks.
That's what I'm saying. These middling guys are not really middle. You know what I mean? I was hoping instead of playing Luka to $100 guys or something like that.
Yeah.
And none of these guys look really, besides Morant, obviously, who doesn't seem too exciting.
No, but enough of the 30s add up, and I think there's enough guys who can get out there can Kelden Johnson get you 30. Right. Dylan Brooks, Brandon Clark, Justice Winslow could even get you 30. He's a cheap guy, but yeah, you are right. It does feel like a funny route. The one other thing we can consider, which we'll talk about on the Dallas side now, this is to me the perfect slate to play Kristaps at too high of a price. You have a 2-game slate, sure. Limited ownership because he's not going to project well on a point per dollar basis at all. So maybe you fade Luka and play Kristaps, because we've seen that happen before when Kristaps gets hot and he puts up more points than Luka, and maybe you don't necessarily need more. You just need him to be within 10 of Luka. And that's a possibility if he gets hot.
Yeah. I'm gonna run some optimizer stuff, and I just want to see how if there are lineups that could be produced that don't have Luka in it. But I'll tell you this one I threw up right here. This one doesn't have Luka in it. This one actually doesn't even have 2 of the 3. This one doesn't. This is one of those middling bills. This one doesn't have Westbrook, for example, or Luka.
Yeah, see, I like that lineup, and I do think that the points there are potentially there. The problem, I worry about Murray, sure, with everybody back or something like that. But Joval, there's the guy who could do it for you. We've seen Joval put up 25 and a quarter a million times. There's no reason he couldn't have 2 quarters like that.
Now, let me ask you another question about that Memphis thing. Now, again, it's not as big of a deal on a 2-game slate, obviously, but in general, does Joval, is he a guy that you don't want to play with Brandon Clark, or it doesn't really matter usually?
So, yeah, you probably don't. but I think
But
it's not
today, I
quite
mean,
as
you may as well. I mean,
it's
like,
not as bad as people think it is because Brandon Clark, because Brandon Clark is kind of a 3-4 combo. Like he plays like he shoots, he plays from the outside too. The problem is Kyle Anderson being healthy and Brooks and all of them. It's hard to even know who starts in this game. It seems weird they would put Kyle Anderson to the bench after how well he's played, but it feels weird also that Brandon Clark's off the bench. So I don't know which way they're going to go because Kyle Anderson was out right before the break. We had different guys out different days before the break, and I've seen it go either way. So I don't know. It's a good question. It's a tough one. I'm sort of liking this Kristaps thing for tonight, though. I think he's definitely going to be obviously the lowest owned of the stud guys, and I think you could definitely get in. He can definitely get you there. He's the route of not playing what Luka's going to be 60%, 70%.
Sure.
He would be the route around it. I think that gives you the most upside.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an easy slate. I mean, like easy, and how do I put this the right way? It's a slate where you're going to be kind of chilled with your lineups, regardless of what you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you don't play Luka, for example, you're going to like the guys you have. And if you play Luka, you'll be able to find some value that you're comfortable with. Like I'd be totally okay with let's say they announced Lopez starting or Moritz start or Wagner starting. I would roll with one of them at 3,200 just for the hell of it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's sort of why I mentioned the backup plays like the Robin Lopez because that is one way to get really different. And it's not like you need a bunch of them, but get 24 out of them, get 22 out of them, and then you can play the other guys you want, and literally no one else. I mean, he's going to be not no one, but he's going to be low owned. Do you want to talk real quick about FanDuel and their prices? I actually think these slates are easier to try to play for tournaments on FanDuel because they try to build you into such a way that you can try and do different things and get pretty different pretty easily, I think.
Well, so as I mentioned, I kind of alluded to this earlier. They made Luka a small forward on FanDuel, which to me it seems as though the uber chalk build is going to be Westbrook and Morant, right? Not to mention they're in the same game or whatever it is. So just for S's and G's, maybe I'll go my next best play, and that'd be probably Jalen Brunson. And Jalen Brunson should relish this role. He's been announced by FanDuel as the starting point guard for the Dallas Mavericks. Maybe he'll take that and kind of take over the usage and tell Luka, hey, go over there. I'm the point guard. You got to go set up in the short corner like Ben Simmons. I doubt it. But again, if you want to get a little different, I guess, and it's not even that much different. I guess Brunson. I guess if you really wanted to be different, you'd play DeJounte Murray over Morant, and then pivot off the pivot. You could put Derek White over him, right? So, but for now, I threw in Westbrook and Brunson, but the two best players are Westbrook and Morant.
You hit on almost what I was thinking, which is really getting weird with it, and it's definitely not optimal. But if you want to take a shot and try to win a tournament that has, let's say you're playing the $4 one, play what I would do is and what I may still do it even in a bigger buy-in is I might play DeJounte Murray as much as I don't think it's optimal. DeJounte Murray and Derek White.
Well, now we're talking.
I mean, they play together. It's not like it's not like they take turns and they only play when the other one's not on the court at all. Like they play together a lot. So that would be the way to get really different, in my opinion. But I like what you, I mean, yeah, it does feel like in Westbrook, if you're playing cash, you have no choice, but you have to play him. Morant would be just behind him in terms of the value, I think. But Derek White and Brunson being the next two guys, Derek White carries with it a bit of risk because of we don't know the exact number of minutes he's going to play or what Pop's going to do with him not having played for a month. He tends to be a little bit more tight with those guys. I also think there's upside for the projected minutes on Jalen Brunson. And I think you could see easily around 30 plus minutes. They really like him in Dallas. He's like, other than
good.
He's good, man. He can really play. Like, so I mean, I think that I could see siding with him. I would actually just probably take the lower owned of the two because I think they're really close. But yeah, I like both he and White. If people go to Derek White because the numbers, he should be the better play. But we can just say, okay, we can use the minutes justification as a real reason to fade him. And I think that Brunson they're right there with each other. But I do like the idea of getting a little different. And maybe even skip Westbrook. Maybe play Ja with one of those guys too. I do think Ja and Westbrook are the best plays, but if you want to mix in a White and Brunson lineup even and just get really different, I think that's what you have to do to win these kind of slates. So I actually like that.
Shooting guard, I guess Brooks and Beal. I mean,
so for me, it's Bane.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
that's something.
Because I think it's too easy to play Brooks and Beal.
Yeah, I guess so. Right?
And that's what everybody does. So I'm okay with Bane in either. But I think the Beal thing, actually, I'm not sure people are going to play Beal as much as they played DeRozan, depending on everything that happens.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because there is people do have sticker shock things with the 10.5. One of my issues with playing Bradley Beal on FanDuel is I'm a little frustrated at his. I mean, he'll get a couple steals. He'll get a steal or I want guys who are going to be out there giving me some steal block upside, and he's not really that guy. And they price him as if he's a freaking, better on FanDuel, when in fact he's much better play in general on DraftKings because of the shooting bonus and the lack of needing the stocks. But yeah, Beal and Brooks are the chalk, along with maybe DeRozan and Brooks. I could go either way with that one. But I really like the idea of playing. Again, if you want to get really different here and spend elsewhere, you can play Tim Hardaway Jr. and Desmond Bane and just go really different. But the main guys are definitely Beal and Brooks, along with DeRozan.
So small forward, for the purpose of this build, we're not going to play Luka, just for the hell of it. We're going to play the systematic risk. We're going to play that the Washington-Memphis game goes off and just something happens in the Dallas game where it just doesn't. So, but Luka's obviously best play, but let's go with my next best play listed. And that's going to be Rui Hachimura. It's not going to be earth shattering either, but let's just throw him in. And then maybe it's so funny. Every single time I say this, it's I say, maybe this is the slate where you could actually play Dorian Finney-Smith. And whenever I say that, he says, okay, 41 minutes, 8 fantasy points. So maybe that's not the right idea. So what's the pivot off of him? Well, let's go back to the other game. You like Winslow? Well, Winslow 3,700 is obviously better on DraftKings, but maybe he won't be as owned at 4,800. Likewise, Demi Avdija was obviously better at 3,200 on DraftKings, but maybe he won't be as highly owned. He obviously won't at 4K. So maybe those are things I'll do. I mean,
go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm inclined to not play Dorian Finney-Smith and do something more like the Winslow or maybe Denny or whatever. But what do you think?
I think if you're not playing Luka, there's some reason to take a shot with Josh Richardson instead of Dorian Finney-Smith. But I don't mind the DFS in general. I think that I would use him more oddly enough, in my Luka lineups. For one, he's a little cheaper. He doesn't rely a whole bunch on Luka. He doesn't take away a whole bunch from Luka. And look, he's 4,600. He's going to play 35 minutes, but so will Josh Richardson, who does carry with him at least a little bit more of offensive upside. The thing is, DFS can still, I don't know. He can squeak his way to 24, 25. I think Josh Richardson has a little bit more of a ceiling. And I would prefer to play Hachimura. So to get really different here is a little bit tough for me, because really I'm not, those 4 guys, and then maybe I would consider Winslow. I'll have to revisit that one later in the day. But I think those 4 guys, it makes sense. And then if Kelden Johnson is really low owned here, I'll take a shot on Kelden Johnson for sure. But
all right, so
we had the priorities. Go ahead.
So Kristaps is a tough fade, but he's the best play by leaps and bounds.
Yep.
But you don't want to do any of that. And you didn't play enough Moritz Wagner at 3,200 over on DraftKings. You try play him at 4K over here. Same argument for Bertans, but we could go we could be thematic, and we could say that Brandon Clark's misprojected, and we could throw him in. So let's for now put in Brandon Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And let's fade Luka. I mean, let's fade Kristaps for a second, even though he's the best play. I just want to see who else I could throw in. Kleber, would he get more? Well, you could certainly play Aldridge if he starts, right?
Yeah, and honestly, again, I'm back to that. If you can play him, if he doesn't, I don't like him quite. Again, maybe I'm still stuck on this too much, but I really always really want the steal block upside, and he just doesn't have that as much in his game. I used that argument for not playing Cantor on FanDuel the other night, and I said he has to go like 20 and 20, and of course he did go 20 and 20 to get there big time. I was saying to get there big time, and it's the thing with Aldridge at this point of his career, he just doesn't get the steals and blocks that he used to. He can still maybe get you one or two, but it's just I don't love the upside for that. So I personally would side actually over here. Kleber, we didn't really mention on DraftKings, and it does make me nervous with Dallas being more healthy, but the minutes are still going to be pretty heavily there for him. It's not the ideal matchup because he doesn't need to match up on the other side with anybody, but I think there's always upside for his minutes. He can always be in the 30s, tends to get in foul trouble, but he does offer the steal block upside that I like. So I find myself slightly leaning Kleber with Aldridge off the bench over here. And but I think mostly it's going to be Kristaps and Brandon Clark for me. I don't mind I think Wagner is always a good tournament play. The problem is when he gets some ownership, which I think he will tonight, it just feels like a fade. But those are the guys I'm mainly looking at. Is just I'm not getting too creative at power forward because it's so ugly. Kristaps, Clark, and
speaking of ownership,
yeah, this is going to be funny.
So I guess Valanciunas is going to be 70%. That would be
It's got to be higher than that, right? Like who else are they going to play?
Well, we're going to play, I guess we're going to play Podol.
Yeah.
So we play Podol. And then what we do is we play Podol because if you don't play you can make the argument that you don't play Valanciunas because of the correlation with Brandon Clark. You can play Brandon Clark. And then if you play Podol, then we get off of Aldridge at power forward, and you could play Kleber if you want. Oh, you liked Trey Lyles a little bit, didn't you?
I liked, yeah. I mean, it's a little, it's very thin. I meant for like longer shot tournaments because right now, I mean, if everybody plays, I mean, one thing is he could end up starting tonight, so that would make him like a really I would like him. I think other people would like him then too. I was more looking for ways to get creative on DraftKings. I don't know over here at this price that I would go that far, but it's not the worst idea in the world to get, way off the board. I would just say though, keep in mind that you want to do that in large field tournaments. I don't think you want to do it in small field tournaments.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense.
So like this lineup, for example, like each literally can't win.
Yep.
But we're gonna try it anyway.
Right.
I mean, you tell me that if Washington Memphis goes to overtime and all these guys are in there, I'm not going to be happy having it. You know what I mean? Like then I'll be more than happy to root for a sprinkler head to go off in Dallas and whatever it is, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but in reality, I mean, Valanciunas is a tough fade. Kristaps is a tough fade. Luka is a tough fade, and you probably want to have at least one of Westbrook or Beal, I suppose.
Yeah, I think Westbrook makes more sense just because of the price over here, but
yeah,
I think if you're playing just because somebody asked, one of the things over Twitter over the weekend was asked if we could throw out some guys who were cash plays, even though I don't play a ton of cash. If you're playing cash as of right now, you're playing on FanDuel, you're playing Joe Val, Westbrook, Luka, and Dylan Brooks. Those are the obvious ones that stand out as not must plays, and then you want to try and get Porzingis in there as well. Actually, I would put Porzingis ahead of Dylan Brooks, I guess, but it's a little bit. You do have to compromise some positions if you play all four of those guys.
When I do this, let me have fun. Let me see what I would do if I were building. And now, when I say building a cash lineup, I want to see if I could build a lineup just on my point per dollar thing and just see where it goes. Okay, this is probably going to end up being like a cash lineup that most people play. So let's put in Valanciunas. Oh, you know who's going to be a good play? Is your guy is Desmond Bane, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put in Valanciunas, you put in Desmond Bane, and then let's say you put in Westbrook and Morant. See, that's why I can't play cash, because I'm never gonna be able to get away with any of this. Morant. Oh, you know who's probably gonna be a cash play? Dorian Finney-Smith, right? Is that what happens?
It would make enough sense. Yeah, sure.
Or is it going to be Rui?
I think both of them will show up. I like Rui a little bit better, but his production has been really bad lately. So I definitely like Rui better. So I think it would be Rui.
Well, you're not going to be able to play both Luka and Kristoff, though, right? Oh, I don't know. That's why I don't play cash. I'll leave
A little
you.
bit tricky. You have to sacrifice some positions. That's what I was saying like before. That's why Kristaps won't show up as being the obvious cash play. But the odd part is then when you look at the positions, he kind of is more of a must at his position than anybody else is, including Westbrook or Luka even, because there's just no. I mean, he could literally double score anybody else at his position, like. So
well, you could get. I mean, you could get these guys if you wanted to.
Yeah, you can.
That's this cash is tough. I don't like cash because if the impact of a cash lineup is you're supposed to feel really super confident and safe about it, and I never feel safe about any lineups. It's like,
especially these days in basketball. And then the problem is like this is why you couldn't do this in a tournament because like I mean you are getting a game stack I guess, but you are asking for an awful lot out of guys who should technically eat somewhat into each other for Memphis. But it is a 2-game slate. And yeah, you could get away with this and then play no Luka. I guess that would be interesting. That would differentiate a little bit.
Good grief. Don't play cash.
Don't play cash is the answer. But I do really think that again, it'll be easier to know a little later in the day with ownership. I'll be in the Discord today. I know I haven't been there as much lately, but I will be around and we can answer any questions as we start getting starting lineups and find out exactly who's playing for the Spurs. Small slate, so nothing too creative is going to happen, but yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at to start, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, we are going to get to a golf video. Guys, good luck tonight, and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.
Sounds good.